Hello, YouTube. I think you want to like and subscribe, or else something really bad is going to happen to you. Hey hooligans, welcome back to another one of my TV show reviews. Today, based on my very poor Joe Goldberg impression, we are talking about You Season 5, the series finale, the one that truly ends it all. Now, this season has been a very divisive one. We will be going into some of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews at the end of this video, but overall, I kind of liked it actually. But before we actually get into my review, this is your major spoiler warning. And in the meantime, I wasn't kidding about liking and subscribing. Now, while I did overall enjoy this season, I can have some guesses of why people did not like it, especially because in the beginning, it did start off pretty slow and it just seemed like we were rehashing old plot points again, and we were just repeating the same storylines over and over again, including them being back in New York and Joe gets to reopen Mooney's. And so a lot of the season takes place in the same settings, including the basement with the cage. But I kind of understand the decision because we are going full circle. We're referencing where the show all began. And I was very curious to see where they were going to take the season and how they were going to wrap everything up. So I was watching this season and I was like, when is this gonna get good? And then when they finally revealed that Bronte wasn't who she said she was and she actually had a connection to Beck, I was kind of gagged and I was like, oh, now it's getting interesting. But then after that, it kind of slowed down again until the last couple of episodes, and then it really got good, and that's kind of where the season sold it for me. Also, this season compared to all of the other ones was very extra steamy. Okay, we're gonna be talking about it. I would say this season is probably the second or third best season overall. I think the fourth season, last season, being the worst for sure. And then probably the second season is still the best, but all of the other seasons kind of fall somewhere in the middle. So let's talk about our main character, Joe Goldberg. He is truly a terrible, terrible human being, but he is just very charming thanks to Penn Badgley, and obviously the characters in the show are also very hypnotized by him. But this season, he is fully 100% himself. He has accepted the dark parts of himself. At the end of last season, he kind of sees his own reflection and is like, you know what? I am an evil person and I'm okay with that. I think this is the most unhinged version of him so far. However, he was definitely not as smart as some of the other seasons. There's a lot more sloppiness to him this season. He is also famous this season thanks to the fame and wealth from Kate. So that doesn't really help him stay under the radar when it comes to kidnapping people and murdering people. In fact, plenty of people clocked him right from the beginning, including Uncle Bob, including Reagan. And speaking of killing Bob, some of the killings this season and some of the things that Joe was up to were very convenient. And I think the show itself was like self-aware that some of the things that were happening was a little ridiculous and too convenient, because Joe made a joke about how lucky he was getting. But for example, when he went to go kill Bob, literally the door was unlocked, the cameras just so happened to never be plugged in, and it just so happened that Bob was taking a nap when he came into his home, and Bob just randomly has like a wall full of like torture devices and guns, perfect for Joe to use. Joe Goldberg clearly wastes a lot of time this season searching through the internet and other people's computers for the right files, albeit all for the wrong reasons, but I bet he would find exactly what he's looking for quickly if he had Dokyo, the sponsor of today's video. If you're anything like me, staying organized online feels almost impossible sometimes. Between files buried in old email chains, documents scattered across Google Drive, Dropbox, random desktop folders, it's a mess. Half the time you spend more energy searching for a file than actually using it. and honestly, it's frustrating. It's not that you don't have the files, it's that you can't remember where they are, what they're called, or which version you need. Enter Dokio. Dokio is the one-stop shop to find, organize, and understand your online files. It uses smart AI to create one unified view of all your files across platforms. You don't have to change how you work, move anything, or make your team learn new habits. Your files stay exactly where they are in Dropbox, Google Drive, etc. But now you can find anything in seconds. The AI is even able to recognize what your files are, not just what the file names are called. I was skeptical at first. I've tried other organization tools before, but Dokio is the first solution that actually works with your natural way of working instead of forcing you to adapt. With Dokio, you can search all your files from tax returns, pay stubs, insurance policies, even receipts. Whether you're managing multiple email accounts, dealing with clients who each want different platforms, or just drowning in digital chaos, Dokio brings order without the headache of changing everything. Go to trydokio.com/JimmyLuhu and use promo code JimmyLuhu to try your first month for free. Your future organized self will thank you. Also, this season had a 3-year time jump, so Henry is now aged up, and a lot of this season is focused on Joe wanting to be a good father figure for Henry, which is pretty ironic considering we know that he is a serial killer and abuser. So it is kind of weird trying to see him be such a good dad to Henry, but deep down he really does care about his son, and it's because his own childhood was really bad, so he doesn't want the same thing to happen to Henry, but by being so protective in the sense that he'll kill people for Henry, it kind of does the exact opposite of what he was intending to. I think the narrations and monologues that Joe does are still some of the best lines in the show. Hello, you. I think they're funny, they're dark and witty, but they also show the delusions and contradictions and how he connects from point A to point B, sometimes from point A to point Z. I think the monologues really are a good, iconic part of the show. Also, each season there's always some kind of literary connections to the plot, and I'm sure there's a bunch of hidden meanings with the books that they show. But for example, last season it was kind of this whodunit style inspired by Agatha Christie's mystery novels. This season it very much plays into the romance tropes and the smutty tropes. Personally, I think the smut was a little bit too much for me. It was cringing me out, but is this what you book talk girlies are looking for? And so Joe is like typing this psychosexual fantasy about killing people and about how he wants to be with Bronte, which on top of just being kind of gross is pretty stupid because he's literally creating evidence against himself for when someone inevitably finds it, and which Bronte does. But I guess part of him did want Bronte to find his writing on purpose. I do think it makes for a cool device that they use throughout the season where they would show Joe's imagination of a scenario, and so we could get like a visual representation of the thoughts that go on in Joe's head. Things also get kind of meta when Bronte calls out the romance tropes that is happening to them in that moment, and I think Bronte being so aware of these romance tropes becomes an ironic part of her own character, which we will talk about when we get to her. There was also a scene later down the road when he was talking to this influencer and trying to sway the public opinion back on his side after he killed Clayton, where he was basically saying, oh, he acted out of love for Bronte and he wasn't seeing clearly, and then the internet was like, oh, he's innocent until proven guilty, and he just did it out of love. Who wouldn't? And I feel like that's not super realistic for today's standards. I feel like cheating against your wife is still seen as a very negative thing. I mean, think of someone like Ned Fulmer from the Try Guys, right? Like, he got absolutely canceled for having an affair with an employee, which is exactly what Joe did. So I feel like if it was in real life, the public opinion would not sway that much back on his side. In fact, it might actually hurt him. But I did like when Maddie said that Joe is an attractive white man with good hair, which does help sway public opinion, and I think that is true in a lot of cases. And I was wondering, maybe they're like referencing the Luigi Mangione situation. Not that I'm like equating Joe and Luigi, but maybe it's like a little hint at that. And then we got to talk about the ending episode when Joe was chasing Bronte through the woods. I think this was probably the strongest episode. I mean, from the start, we know that Joe is either going to die this season or is going to get caught. So I think it was fun to kind of play along and see how he was going to get caught. It reminded me a little bit of watching Death Note, where we knew Light was going to get caught. We just didn't know exactly how. But I thought that episode was really well done. It was like some horror movie thriller type shit, and I thought it was really well done. I was genuinely scared of Joe when he was like running full speed back into the house, about to just tear up Bronte. I also liked the fact that he was like almost completely naked, and not for that reason, but because it shows that he's like at his most primal state. He's animalistic. He is nothing but this beast, which that police was like kind of foreshadowing at the gas station. He was like, look out for the predators. I am glad he didn't die though, because I feel like that would have been too easy for him. I think he deserves to be locked up in prison forever and rot there and be lonely, because all he wanted in life was to find connections with people. And so I feel like taking that away from him is a really good form of punishment for him. I also thought it was funny and poetic that Bronte shot his thing off, because I feel like he uses sex as a way of manipulation and control and power. And now that he doesn't have his parts, he will never be able to use that as a form of power anymore. Also, the final thing that Joe says is kind of a question to the viewers. He was basically saying, is it really my fault, as in a serial killer's fault, or is it society's obsession with serial killers? And I don't really know the answer to that, but I do think that is a cool question to ask the audience, because why are we as a society so obsessed with true crime and murderers? And there are people who will send love letters to these criminals, such as Ted Bundy. He would get so many love letters, and it's just like, how can you know what someone has done to other people and still like fall in love with them? So I thought that was a cool message for the show to end on. And I feel like we have to give Penn Badgley his flowers. He really did his big one this season. I mean, the acting was off the charts. I'm like genuinely stunned how he turns that character on. Like, how do you go to such a dark place and then turn it off and just return to normal life? Okay, now let's talk about Kate, who I was not a big fan of last season. I thought she was kind of annoying compared to the other love interests, but this season really made me like her, and I think she is one of the better love interests. And also the ending of last season, when she was like, I don't care that you killed people, it kind of made it out to seem like she was also evil, but I think this season really humanized her and showed that she's not the same as Joe, even though she did hurt a lot of people, but she definitely is more so just power hungry than straight up like evil. And I'm not sure if she did get the correct punishment for her actions, because as we know, she was complicit in basically the deaths of many children. But we'll talk about what happens to her. So the season starts off with Kate attending this charity, and I was thinking, this is a very, very generous thing that she's doing, like genuinely good, because she's trying to raise a lot of funds for kids in the foster system who are not necessarily equipped with the right opportunities to go to college. But obviously she's like kind of overcompensating for the whole pipeline scandal. So this kind of kickstarts the rest of the plot where her family is now trying to take her down. And this ultimately kind of causes her to let Joe out of his cage for the last 3 years, and he goes on to kill Uncle Bob, which of course turns into a bunch of more murders. So in a way, it kind of is Kate's fault for enabling him murdering people, but I mean, Joe was a ticking time bomb, so I feel like eventually he was going to kill someone, whether Kate liked it or not. So then eventually Kate and Joe's marriage starts just crumbling. It's very reminiscent of how it went down with Love. And Joe always in these situations acts like the victim. It is so annoying to watch, but I'm so glad Kate called him out on his bullshit, because she was like, you do not get to act like the victim every time. And that's what I like about Kate, is that she's very straight to the point. She will call it as she sees it. Also, Kate kind of recognizes the fact that she tried so hard to not become her father that she was blindsided to the fact that she basically married a man just like her father. But I thought Kate was a badass this season, and not only just because she's like rich with a bunch of resources and she can hire bodyguards and fly to London whenever she wants, but mostly because of her intelligence. She was always one step ahead of Joe. And this is a rare occurrence, because even someone as smart as Love Quinn still ended up being one step behind Joe. I will say Kate finally got fooled at the end when sometime Joe decided to bury a key inside of his arm, which nobody would have seen coming, because that is so messed up, so ridiculous. Like, no one would have thought about that. Also, she had one scene this season where she finally confronted Bronte at the apartment at Mooney's, but I kind of wish she had more interactions with Bronte, because these are the two love interests of Joe, like mainly this season, and I thought she was being way too nice to Bronte. She's a better person than me, to be honest. But I do appreciate Kate's maturity in that situation, because she recognizes that Bronte was just as much of a victim to Joe as she was. So there wasn't too much of a point in, you know, beating her while she was down. So I think that was very big of Kate. Also, Kate decides to bring back Nadia and Marianne, which was such a cool moment in the season. I wish they got to do more, especially Marianne. She just came back for a quick little cameo. Basically, that's it. I thought the look on Joe's face when he realized that Marianne was still alive, that was priceless. I was also equally as shocked, but then I was thinking, oh, I think I do remember Marianne was alive last season, so I should have anticipated her coming back. And it was nice to see at the very end, Nadia, Marianne, and Kate were all able to kind of continue living their lives as they wanted to. I also thought we were going to see Ellie, I believe, played by Jenna Ortega, at least in like a quick cameo or something, but maybe she just had conflicting schedules while filming Wednesday, or maybe they just didn't have the budget for her, but I kind of wish we got to see her again. I also really did think Kate died in that fire, especially because of that scene where they showed Henry being like, you're a monster for doing what you did to my mom. So I thought she died for sure, but no, she came out of that fire unscathed. They did not show how she got out. Who knows how she did. Apparently nobody got hurt in that fire, so. But I am really glad that she's alive, even though I could have seen why she would have died this season, because maybe that would have been punishment for her basically killing a bunch of kids. But, you know, if we ignore that fact, I'm glad she's alive to still take care of Henry, because it was important to recognize, even though Henry is the direct son of Joe and that maybe violence can be inherited, I think it's important that being raised by the correct parent, you can still choose to not be the same as your father, or choose to walk away from what traumatized you in your past. And I do think Kate is well equipped to be Henry's mother, because she does genuinely care for Henry as well, and I think she is going to be able to break this cycle of violence. And now let's talk about Kate's family members. There was Teddy, who is Kate's half brother. He was like the most sane person of everybody this entire season. He was just like a normal guy who did not want to be a part of all of this shenanigans, but he didn't get too much to do in the season. I'm glad he made it out alive though. And now let's talk about Reagan / Maddie, some of my favorite characters this season. Anna Camp, the actress who plays them, you did your big one. I think second to Penn Badgley, she probably did the best acting job this season. She did such a good job making the two twins very distinct. I thought that scene when she was like crashing out in the bathroom trying to hide from Kate and putting on her outfit to pretend to be Reagan, and then literally changing voices as like she was in the bathroom, I thought that was a really good scene. She did such a good job. I really hated Reagan's character, but she absolutely clocked Joe and Kate's tea immediately, and she was going to bring them down if Joe did not kill her. I really liked Maddie. I think she brought a lot of the comedy to this season. A lot of her moments I was cracking the fuck up. I also thought when Joe kidnapped Reagan, but it turned out to actually be Maddie, I thought that was a great twist. I did not expect it at all, even though this always happens somehow when twins are involved in movies and TV shows, and they kind of even call it out. They were like, this is some kind of movie situation that we're in. And having Maddie kill Reagan was a really messed up move from Joe, but I will say they did not really give a lot of humanity to Reagan, so that there wasn't too much to root for anyway. So like, I didn't feel too bad for her that Maddie killed her. But what I thought was going to happen when Joe like left to do something else and Maddie and Reagan were talking in the cage, I thought that they were going to switch clothes. I guess they couldn't really switch hairstyles, so that might be the one problem with this idea, but I thought they were going to switch clothes and then pretend that they killed Reagan with the needle, but it would actually Maddie, because she would be immune to it. I don't know if that's how insulin works, but she needs insulin because she has diabetes, so I thought she wouldn't actually be dead, and then both of them would jump Joe, and then that would require Joe to actually kill off one of them. Okay, now let's talk about Bronte / Louise, but I'm just gonna call her Bronte. Her character I went on a roller coaster with, okay? I started off really not liking her at first, and then I liked her, and then I hated her. But then I liked her again. What I did like about her at first was that she was like super nosy straight from the beginning, and that immediately landed her inside of the cage. I thought that was pretty funny. But also, why didn't more characters be more nosy around Moonies? Because the basement's not exactly like hard to find, and Joe's always being so mysterious about it. I would have been curious too. But I could not believe that Joe was into her. He said something like, how can someone be so frustrating yet utterly captivating? And I said, oh, excuse me? I think a lot of people from the trailer of the season thought that Bronte was a downgrade from all the other women that Joe had a relationship with, and I was like started the season agreeing with that, because I was like, this is really a downgrade, no shade. And I'm not even talking about her looks, like I don't even want to go there. I'm mostly talking about her personality. Her personality just gave me such an ick. Like the way she was like, I'm just into baddies, and she said that in front of Henry. I was like, this is so gross. And then she did that whole like hair tuck and lip bite thing. I was cringing so hard. But in a weird way, the fact that it's so hard to believe that Joe would fall for someone like Bronte actually helped the thesis of Joe's character, because they definitely answer why he's into her. And it's because Kate had basically had a leash on Joe for the past 3 years, and he is not someone who likes to be controlled. He needs that power. He needs to be that knight in shining armor to save someone. And Kate does not need his help. Kate is basically his sugar mommy, so she does not care for Joe's help. But then when Bronte comes his way, he like projects all of this onto her because she's this poor, homeless, lost girl. Of course she needs this knight in shining armor to come sweep her off her feet. It's almost like a primal instinct that Joe has. It's like he cannot stay focused on one woman if she no longer needs his help. Like he just instinctually needs to find the next person. And you know what? Bronte absolutely took advantage of this trait because she played right into that trope and she knew exactly what to say for him to fall even deeper in love with Bronte. And it's interesting because Bronte kept on bringing up the fact that I don't want to be this romance trope. I don't want to play into the other woman stereotype. But then she actually purposely did keep playing into that trope to her own advantage because she was trying to catfish him. But then unintentionally, she was also falling into her own trap of this trope, and then it caused her to actually fall in love with Joe. And so the moment that I started liking Bronte again was when we got the reveal that she had a connection with Beck. And I did not see that coming from anywhere. I thought that was a great reveal. It just shows that one person's life has so many networks, and if one person gets killed off, so many people in their lives are affected. And I think that was a good way of like connecting Bronte and Beck. So I didn't think that Bronte was exactly who she said she was because she was like being mysterious with her name from the get-go. But I did think that the twist was that, oh, she's actually just, she used to be a dentist, she used to be well off, she's actually not this poor homeless girl that she says she is. I thought that was the twist, so I didn't expect the whole Beck subplot. And I thought it was really powerful of Bronte for demanding Joe to redact all of the things he wrote in place of Beck in her book, because Joe really did take away not only her life, took away her voice, took away Bronte's voice. So I thought that was a really powerful moment. But then what made me hate her again was when they caught Joe killing Clayton on TikTok live, and then Bronte basically betrayed her friends and everybody for defending Joe and saying that it was self-defense, because at that point she had already lured herself into Joe's trap and she didn't think that he was the real killer. And I was like, girl, stand up. Like, this is so frustrating. But I will say this moment made it more satisfying at the very end when Bronte was like, even I have woken up from your bullshit and I will no longer tolerate this serial killer. But I do wish that she played it out more in her head and made more of a plan of what she was gonna do, because now she's in a house in the middle of nowhere, almost in Canada, and all she had going for her plan was, I'm gonna take out this Glock in the middle of foreplay. I also did think that Joe actually killed her, like when she was drowning in the lake, but maybe she was smart enough to pretend that she had drowned and then she just came back. I mean, clearly that is what she did. I was also pretty shocked to find out that her friend Clayton was the son of Dr. Nikki. Again, back to the part where every life has so many different connections. And it really just shows like how many lives were destroyed by Joe. Even just like one person being killed impacts so many. And speaking of Clayton and the rest of Bronte's friends, I thought this was very much commentary on social media, the power of TikTok Live and Reddit, because internet sleuthers in the past really have been a legitimate part of solving true crimes. There's been documentaries about internet sleuthers being the ones to actually solve these crimes. And especially TikTok, I love how caught up to the modern day that You is, because TikTok truly gives an equal platform to everyone, almost equal platform to everyone to speak their piece, right? This is where we see a bunch of the past characters make a cameo on TikTok stating their piece. So it does kind of make you wonder like what would happen if a serial killer or a murderer were to be captured on social media. That would be so crazy. The internet would blow up. And I think that's why serial killers nowadays, there's not as many, I think, because of the amount of surveillance we have, the power of TikTok live on everyone's phone. So it's a lot harder for serial killers to get away with things, thank God. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty good season. But let's look at some of these Rotten Tomato reviews, because the audience score right now is at a 58%. So let's see what people have to say. So this one person says, very slow paced. It looked like the writers just wanted to create a YouTube Rewind 2018 kind of thing, bringing old characters just for the sake of it, while lacking substance and storyline. I don't really agree with that, because the old characters, first of all, a lot of them were just cameos, and then the more big characters like Marianne and Nadia, they barely had that much to do anyway, and it did kind of play into the plot itself. So I don't know, I feel like it made sense to bring back some of these characters because it is the final season. It does like wrap everything up, but I will agree with the slow pace in the beginning. It was a little tedious to get through at first. This person says this season is absolutely horrible, annoying side characters, messy writing, weak ending, and the toxic masculinity nonsense they try to push at the end. Why is toxic masculinity in a show about murderous serial killer? The writers are playing around with such a serious story. That is one thing I forgot to mention, which was the guy who tried to kill Bronte because he was like in this manosphere red pill type of space, and he really just wanted to like hurt women. And I do think that was a little out of place, because that was just adding one extra deep conversation to this season that already had a lot going on. So I agree, it didn't necessarily need to be added, but it is a real conversation these days. Like, this is a thing that exists, is this like really toxic space on the internet. If you've seen Adolescence, it also very much apparent in that show, but obviously that show Adolescence did a much better job exploring this conversation, because that show is actually what it was about. So yes, I agree in the sense that we didn't need that in this season. This person who gave 5 stars said, after season 4 not being great, I was a little worried going into this. The start of the season felt a little slower than I was hoping, but the last few episodes, especially the ending, was very entertaining and chilling. I very much agree with that. One person said, I think there's only so much that can be done with this type of narrative before it gets too repetitive. Keeping that in mind, I think this still managed to give a satisfying conclusion to the series. The suspense and twists aren't as well executed as the first 3 seasons. Some plot choices aren't as strong, but I enjoyed most of the characters, and all in all found it more engaging than season 4. So I'm glad this was the send-off season. Totally agree with that. Season 4 was a lot worse than this one. I do think season 3, season 5 are, I would say they're pretty equal in my head. There's one person who gave half a star, said unwatchable. A lot of things don't make sense. Bronte and Friends especially. Why don't they make any sense? I feel like they did make sense. They're like internet sleuthers. Now, if you want to talk about their acting, yeah, I agree, their acting was not great. But someone says, Penn Badgley, I can't wait to see what he does next, whether it be in movies or music. Yeah, this man can sing too. But yeah, I really want to see him in some more projects. Give him something that's not a serial killer, please. This man needs a break. Okay, so clearly there are some mixed reviews in here. Let me know what you guys thought of this season. What did you guys think about Bronte? I'm very curious about that one. And what did you think about the very ending? Hey hooligans, thanks for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, then make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.